It may sound strange, but the moment you stop trying to untangle your thoughts might be the moment they finally loosen on their own. Most people believe clarity comes from thinking harder, pushing further, searching faster. Yet the mind often grows quieter when it is no longer being chased. If you've been carrying a restless weight inside, the kind that follows you into quiet rooms and lingers even on peaceful days, you're not alone. There is a gentle way back to stillness, one that doesn't demand strength or certainty, only a small willingness to pause. And somewhere within this story, you may recognize a feeling you thought no one else could see. Imagine discovering that the calm you've been waiting for has been waiting for you too, just beneath the noise. Not hidden far away, not reserved for a different kind of person, but resting quietly under the surface of your own breath. This story begins with someone who believed he had lost his peace for good, only to stumble upon it in the most ordinary way. What he learned did not arrive as a grand revelation, but as a soft shift, almost easy to overlook. Yet once seen, it changed the way he met every storm that came after. If you've ever wished for one clear moment where your mind stops arguing with itself, stay for a little while. You won't be asked to solve anything or become someone new, only to listen, as you might listen to rain when there is nowhere else you need to be. Because sometimes the deepest clarity appears not when we search for answers, but when we finally stop disturbing the water. And the story you're about to hear begins at exactly that quiet edge. The young man often felt as if his mind were a crowded room where everyone spoke at once, chairs scraping, questions colliding midair. He would wake already tired, as though he had spent the night arguing with invisible guests who refused to leave. Regrets tapped his shoulder, unfinished conversations replayed themselves, and even the smallest decisions somehow grew heavy. Once, while waiting for the kettle to boil, he caught himself staring at nothing, wondering when thinking had become so loud. More than answers, he found himself longing for just one clear, quiet moment where nothing inside him needed explaining. He carried confusion the way travelers carry overstuffed bags, shifting the weight from one hand to the other, never truly resting. Some days it was an old mistake that returned uninvited. Other days it was a question about the future that refused to sit still. A careless comment from someone at the market could echo for hours, as if his mind had a habit of saving every bruise. He tried to solve it by thinking harder, which only tangled the threads tighter, like earphones in a pocket. By evening, he felt the peculiar fatigue of someone who had done nothing visible, and yet was utterly worn through. There were moments when he would step outside at dusk, hoping the cool air might rinse the noise from his thoughts. He would watch a single cloud drift slowly, almost lazily, and feel a quiet envy for something that didn't rush itself. In those pauses, he sensed that peace wasn't far away, just buried under layers of mental static. Still, the stillness never stayed long. The mind would rev up again, impatient, like a dog tugging at its leash. He began to wonder, not for the first time, whether calm was something people found or something they uncovered. On his kitchen shelf sat a small glass snow globe he didn't remember buying, a tiny house frozen inside a swirl of white. Sometimes he would shake it absent-mindedly, watching the storm bloom and settle again. It felt oddly familiar, how easily the scene vanished the moment it was disturbed. He noticed that the more vigorously he shook it, the longer it took for the flakes to fall back into place. He didn't realize why he kept returning to it, only that he understood it in a way he couldn't quite name. One evening, after a day that felt particularly tangled, he shook the globe and set it down harder than he meant to. The tiny storm inside raged on, obscuring the little house completely, as if clarity itself had been erased. He leaned closer, waiting for it to clear, tapping the glass once, then again, impatient without knowing why. Somewhere deep down, a quiet question stirred. What if the storm stayed because he wouldn't stop touching it? And with that uneasy thought lingering in the air, there came a soft knock at his door that he hadn't been expecting. When he opened the door, he found an older woman standing there with the unhurried posture of someone who had nowhere else she needed to be. She apologized gently for the mistake. She had meant to visit the neighbor downstairs, yet didn't seem flustered at all. Her voice carried a softness that made the room feel less crowded, as though some invisible noise had stepped outside with her. Noticing the snow globe trembling on the table, she tilted her head with a faint, knowing smile. "Storm in there too?" she asked lightly, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. He let out a tired laugh, the kind that slips out when someone accidentally names what you couldn't explain. Before he could stop himself, he admitted that his thoughts often felt just like that. shaken, cloudy, impossible to see through. She listened without interrupting, hands resting calmly in her coat pockets, eyes steady but kind. It unsettled him a little, how she didn't rush to fix anything or offer clever words. Her quiet attention felt like a chair being offered to someone who had been standing for far too long. After a pause, she stepped closer to the table and looked at the globe without touching it. "You know," she said, almost to herself, "most storms keep going because someone keeps shaking them." He frowned, unsure whether she meant the toy or something else entirely. She went on to explain gently that minds often grow louder when pressed for quick answers they're not ready to give. "Sometimes," she added, "the struggle to force clarity is what keeps it hidden in the first place." He found himself leaning against the counter, strangely relieved and uneasy at once. Part of him wanted to argue. Surely thinking more was the only way to solve anything. Yet another part, quieter and older, recognized the truth the way one recognizes a familiar path in the dark. She spoke of how gentleness toward one's own confusion can loosen knots that force only tightens. It wasn't advice so much as an observation, offered the way someone might point out that the rain had finally stopped. Before leaving, she gave the snow globe one last glance, now almost clear on its own. "Noise settles when it's allowed to," she said, reaching for the door handle with calm certainty. He watched the tiny flakes drifting downward, surprised at how different the scene looked without interference. For a brief moment, the room felt spacious, as if something inside him had quietly exhaled, and he couldn't shake the feeling that their accidental meeting hadn't been accidental at all. In the days that followed, the young man noticed how quickly the noise returned once he was alone again. A simple message left unanswered could spiral into imagined rejection, then into memories of every goodbye he never understood. At the grocery store, he stood too long choosing between two identical jars, as if the wrong one might confirm his worst fears about himself. He began to see how even ordinary moments turned heavy when his thoughts rushed ahead of him. It frightened him, the possibility that calm might always slip through his fingers just when he needed it most. At night, sleep came in thin fragments, broken by rehearsed conversations and apologies to people who weren't there. He would stare at the ceiling, replaying an old criticism from years ago, still sharp as if freshly spoken. Sometimes he pressed a hand to his chest, half expecting to feel the knot inside him as something physical. He wondered how others moved through life making decisions without second-guessing every step. The fear that certainty might never return settled quietly beside him like an unwelcome companion. One morning, after nearly missing his bus because he couldn't decide whether to go to work at all, he stayed home instead. The silence in the apartment felt louder than any street, filled with unfinished thoughts hovering like dust in sunlight. He picked up the snow globe again, shaking it without really intending to, watching the tiny storm erase the house inside. For a moment he saw himself in it, a life still there, just impossible to see clearly through the swirl. His chest tightened with the uneasy sense that he might always live this way, peering through emotional fog. He tried a small experiment he barely remembered the woman mentioning, doing nothing for a minute. So he set the globe down, placed both hands flat on the table, and took one slow breath in, then another out. The urge to reach for his phone, to distract himself, to resume the inner debate, it all flared up at once. But he stayed, awkward and restless, noticing how unfamiliar stillness felt in a body used to bracing. Somewhere in that discomfort, a thin thread of relief flickered, almost too subtle to trust. When the minute passed, the globe had cleared again, the tiny house reappearing as if it had been waiting patiently. He leaned closer, surprised by how gentle the scene looked when it wasn't being shaken. A thought crossed his mind, not loud, not urgent, just quietly present, that maybe calm wasn't gone, only buried. He didn't know what to do with that idea yet, so he simply sat there, letting it exist without argument. And as the morning light crept across the table, he sensed he was standing at the edge of something he couldn't yet name. Later that afternoon, as rain traced slow lines down the window, he found himself drawn back to the small globe again. In the gray light, the glass looked almost like a quiet planet resting in his palm, self-contained and fragile. He turned it over gently this time, watching the first flakes lift like startled birds. The tiny house disappeared behind the swirl, not destroyed, just hidden by motion. It struck him how little it took to blur something that had been perfectly clear moments before. He noticed a familiar impulse rising, the urge to shake it harder, to hurry the storm along as if speed might reveal answers faster. Instead, he stopped halfway, holding the globe midair, unsure what would happen if he didn't follow the habit through. The flakes drifted unevenly, confused by the interruption, like thoughts cut off before finishing their complaint. His hand trembled slightly, the effort of restraint surprisingly heavy for something so small. For the first time, he wondered how often he stirred his own storms without meaning to. Setting the globe down, he leaned back and studied it as though it were trying to teach him something quietly. Whenever he demanded clarity, his mind clouded. Whenever he chased certainty, it ran further away. The glass object seemed to mirror that truth without accusation, just patiently replaying the pattern. He even felt a faint, sheepish smile tug at his mouth, the way one smiles at a mistake too obvious to deny. It was oddly comforting to see confusion contained in something he could hold. A memory surfaced of the woman's calm face, how she had looked at the globe without reaching for it. He tried to imitate that stillness, resting his hands on his knees as if they, too, needed reassurance. Outside, a car passed with a hiss on the wet street, then silence folded back into the room. The flakes inside the globe continued their slow descent, unbothered by his watching. He felt briefly like a witness rather than a participant in his own turbulence. By the time the last speck settled, the tiny house stood clear and steady once more, untouched by the storm that had obscured it. He exhaled without realizing he had been holding his breath, a quiet release that softened his shoulders. It dawned on him that the clarity had been there all along, simply waiting for the motion to end. Yet the habit of reaching in, of stirring the waters, still lingered in his fingers like muscle memory, and he sensed that understanding this was only the beginning of something that would soon ask more of him. A few evenings later, he stepped outside for air and found the same older woman sitting quietly on the building's front steps. She greeted him as if she had been expecting him all along, though her expression carried no trace of insistence. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and the silence felt companionable rather than awkward. He realized how rare it was to be with someone who didn't rush to fill every pause. Almost shyly, he mentioned the snow globe and how he couldn't stop thinking about it. Her eyes softened with recognition, as though he had just handed her a familiar story. Instead of responding with explanations, she simply nodded and looked out toward the dimming sky. A breeze stirred the leaves above them, then faded, leaving the air still again. He sensed she was showing him something without words, though he couldn't yet grasp what it was. Her calm felt steady, like a quiet lake that refused to mirror passing storms. After a while, she asked if he had the globe with him, and he admitted he had tucked it into his jacket pocket without knowing why. He placed it between them on the step, slightly embarrassed by the gesture, as if revealing something personal. She studied it with the same gentle attention as before, hands resting in her lap. When he instinctively reached to shake it, she lightly touched his wrist, not stopping him, just slowing him down. The contact was brief, yet it seemed to ripple through his restless energy. She withdrew her hand and folded it back into her sleeve, saying nothing at all. Together they watched the untouched globe, clear and quiet in the fading light. He felt the familiar itch to disturb it, to make something happen, to escape the stillness creeping in. But her presence made the urge feel unnecessary, almost childish, like splashing water just to prove it exists. For the first time, he wondered what might unfold if he allowed the moment to remain exactly as it was. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting a soft glow over the glass surface. In that muted light, the tiny house inside looked peaceful, almost inviting. He sensed that the woman understood something about storms that he had only begun to notice, yet she offered no instructions, no comforting promises, only the quiet companionship of someone unafraid of silence. And as the night settled gently around them, he felt that whatever came next would not arrive through force. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, I created an ebook called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours and More Too bonus for you. It's for those who want to let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. After a long stretch of shared quiet, he finally asked the question that had been circling inside him for days. "How do you make it stop?" he said, nodding toward the globe, though they both knew he meant more than that. The woman's smile was tender, almost apologetic, as if she understood the weight behind such a small sentence. "Oh," she murmured, "you don't make it stop. She turned her gaze back to the glass, letting the words rest between them without urgency. He waited, unsure whether he had misheard, the old impatience tapping faintly at his ribs. Seeing this, she gently picked up the globe and gave it a firm shake, snow erupting into a sudden white storm. The tiny house vanished again, swallowed by the swirl he had come to know too well. Then, without ceremony, she placed it back down on the step and folded her hands in her lap, and she did nothing else. They sat there as the flakes whirled wildly, his instinct screaming to grab it, to fix it, to clear the view. But she remained still, eyes half closed, as though watching something far beyond the storm. Gradually, almost shyly, the movement inside the globe began to slow on its own. The chaos softened into drifting, then into a quiet descent. He felt his breath follow the same pattern without being told to. "Clarity isn't forced," she said at last, her voice as calm as the settled scene before them. "It appears when disturbance grows tired of itself." He swallowed, the truth of it landing somewhere deeper than thought, somewhere wordless. She explained that the need for immediate answers keeps the mind shaking long after the question has faded. Sometimes, she added, surrender is simply putting the globe down and trusting the snow to remember how to fall. He stared at the tiny house now visible again, struck by how nothing inside had actually changed. All that had shifted was the motion around it, the restless energy that had kept it hidden. A quiet warmth spread through his chest, not relief exactly, but the first hint of understanding. He sensed that letting go of urgency might be harder than any solution he had tried before, and yet something in him was ready to attempt the unfamiliar experiment of not interfering. In the days that followed, he began to notice the exact moment when his thoughts tried to surge ahead of him. It often happened after small things, a delayed reply, a sharp tone, the memory of someone's disappointed face. Instead of chasing the spiral, he would pause wherever he was, even if only for the length of a single breath. Once, in the middle of washing dishes, he simply set the sponge down and let the water run warm over his hands. The silence that followed felt awkward at first, like stepping into a room where the music had just stopped. There was discomfort in those pauses, a restless energy that searched for something to grip. He realized how much of his life had been spent filling space so he wouldn't have to feel that unease. Sometimes he whispered, "Just wait," not as an order, but as a reassurance to himself. He would picture the snow globe resting untouched, flakes drifting downward in their own time. Strangely, that image made the tightness in his chest loosen by a small but noticeable degree. Moments of clarity began to surface in ordinary places, often when he wasn't looking for them. While tying his shoes one morning, he suddenly knew which decision had been quietly right all along. The answer arrived without fanfare, as if it had been waiting for the noise to clear a path. He even laughed softly, surprised by how simple it felt compared to the struggle he had expected. It was like finding something in plain sight that he had overlooked while searching everywhere else. Not every attempt felt peaceful. Some days the silence seemed to amplify everything he feared. On those days, he practiced staying anyway, placing a hand over his heart for a minute or two. He would breathe slowly, imagining each exhale settling the invisible snow inside him. Gradually, the panic would soften into a dull hum, then into something he could sit beside without flinching. He began to trust that discomfort was not a sign of failure, only the mind learning a new rhythm. One evening, he noticed the snow globe had remained undisturbed on the shelf for nearly a week. The sight filled him with a quiet pride, the gentle kind that asks for no witness. He picked it up carefully, not to shake it, but simply to hold it and feel its steady weight. For the first time, he understood that peace wasn't fragile, only easily obscured. And he sensed that life would soon test this new stillness in ways he couldn't rehearse. The test arrived on an ordinary morning, disguised as a message that felt sharper than it probably was. A colleague's brief words carried a hint of blame, and his chest tightened before he could stop it. Old habits rushed forward, urging him to defend himself, to replay every detail until he felt certain again. He stood in the doorway with his coat half on, heart drumming like it had somewhere urgent to be. For a moment, the familiar storm threatened to return in full. Then he remembered the globe waiting quietly on his shelf at home, untouched, patient. He let his hand fall from the doorknob and leaned against the wall, closing his eyes for one slow breath. Instead of composing arguments in his head, he simply noticed the swirl of feeling without stepping into it. The pause felt longer than it was, a suspended second where nothing needed solving. When he opened his eyes again, The urgency had softened around the edges. He typed a short reply, calm, honest, without the sharpness he would once have used as armor. To his surprise, the conversation settled almost immediately, misunderstanding dissolving like mist in sunlight. There was no dramatic resolution, just a quiet return to balance that felt oddly satisfying. He realized how many storms in his life had been fed by the need to respond before understanding. Sometimes, it seemed, peace arrived not through effort, but through restraint. Later, while waiting in line at a crowded cafe, someone brushed past him without apology. The irritation flickered, quick and hot, ready to ignite a familiar internal monologue. Instead, he shifted his weight, took a small breath, and imagined setting an invisible globe down between them. The feeling passed through him like a brief gust, rather than a lingering wind. He even found himself smiling faintly, amused by how different the moment felt. As he stepped back onto the street, the world looked unchanged, yet somehow gentler. Cars moved, people hurried, voices overlapped, but none of it pressed against him the way it once had. He sensed that calm wasn't the absence of noise, only the absence of resistance to it. Somewhere inside, a steady space had formed, quiet enough to return to whenever needed, and he wondered how many other moments in life might unfold differently if met from that place. Somewhere along the way, he began to imagine that others might be carrying storms just as quietly as he once had. So, on certain evenings, he would sit by the window with the globe in his hands, thinking of no one in particular. He wondered what would happen if someone, somewhere, simply paused with him for a minute. Not to solve anything, not to understand everything, just to stop stirring the water for a while. The thought felt strangely comforting, like lighting a candle in a room you may never enter again. If someone had been watching, they would have seen nothing remarkable, just a tired man sitting still. He would set the globe down gently, rest his palms on his knees, and let his shoulders drop a little. One slow breath in, one slow breath out, as if he were signaling to his body that it could stand down. Thoughts would pass through, some loud, some tender, but he didn't chase any of them. He treated them the way one watches rain on a window, present, yet not demanding response. Occasionally, a memory would surface, something sharp enough to hook his attention. Instead of wrestling it, he would imagine placing it inside the globe and setting it back on the shelf. The image felt almost childlike, yet it worked, creating just enough distance to breathe again. Within a minute or two, the emotional charge would soften, like snow settling into quiet shapes. He realized that clarity didn't need long rituals, only small moments of honest stillness. There were nights when he whispered a single sentence into the silence, just to hear something gentle. "I don't have to solve this right now," he would say, the words simple, but unexpectedly freeing. Sometimes he wrote the same line on a scrap of paper and left it beside the globe. By morning, the problem that had seemed urgent often looked smaller, almost manageable. It amused him how the mind relaxed once it realized it wasn't being chased. If someone had asked him what to do when everything felt tangled, he might have answered quietly, "Sit down, breathe once, and imagine the storm inside you remembering how to fall on its own. Watch your thoughts without grabbing them, the way you might watch leaves drifting on water. Trust that what needs to become clear will do so when it's ready, not when you demand it." And as he practiced this himself, he sensed the story was moving towards something gently inevitable. On the first clear morning after many days of rain, he woke earlier than usual and opened the window. The air carried that quiet freshness that seems to exist only after a storm has finished speaking. He placed the snow globe on the sill, not to study it, just to let it share the light with him. For a long while, he watched the horizon slowly brighten, colors returning without hurry. It felt like witnessing the world remember its own calm. He realized then that clarity had never been something he needed to build or chase. It had been there beneath the noise all along, steady as the small house inside the glass. All his effort had done was keep the storm alive, like stirring water to check if it was still muddy. A quiet gratitude settled over him, the kind that doesn't ask to be spoken aloud. He understood why the woman had never tried to explain too much. People passed on the street below, each carrying their own invisible weather. He wondered how many of them believed they had to force their way back to peace. If only they knew how gently it returned when given space, like dust drifting down in sunlight. He felt no urge to correct them, only a soft compassion he hadn't known before. Some lessons, he sensed, arrive only when the mind grows tired of resisting them. He picked up the globe one last time, turning it slowly so the light moved through the clear water. The tiny house stood quietly, unchanged by every storm it had ever endured. For a brief second, he considered shaking it, almost out of nostalgia for the old habit. Instead, he smiled and set it back down, letting the stillness remain undisturbed. The gesture felt like closing a door without locking it. As the sun finally broke free of the horizon, the glass caught the light and scattered it across the room. The reflections trembled softly on the walls, then settled into steady shapes. He stood there, breathing easily, aware of a spaciousness inside that no longer felt fragile. Somewhere in the distance, a bird crossed the pale sky, unhurried and sure of its direction, and the day opened before him like a clear path he didn't need to rush to follow.